Hey everyone, back with another review, and this time I wanted to check something out that I will probably not be able to get properly into frame the whole duration of the video, which is this here, Solothurn Feder by Kvetun and Black Armory. Okay, so with this thought, maybe it's good to really start with what it actually is that we have here, because as I mentioned, this is the Solothurn Feder by Black Armory and Kvetun. And for the name, first thing to probably get out of the way is the name. Solothurn, Solothurn. I'm just going to stick with Solothurn because that's how I would butcher the name as a German speaker, and that's just what I'm going to stick with. So this is called after a town in Switzerland, Solothurn. And it is named that because that is where we actually have an original existing Federschwert, Fechtfeder, Fechtschwert, however you want to call these, a fencing sword. And as I understand it, this project came about as a collaboration between Black Armory and Kvetun as a replica of the existing original for a museum, for an exhibition. And then the thought process kind of went that, hey, we already have the measurements, so why not streamline it a bit more and offer it to the wider HEMA community? And that's how we got this here, basically. There are several versions of this. There is, of course, the original, which doesn't quite look like this. The original is actually quite rough, really. Then you have the replica. And then there is the HEMA version, which is what I actually ordered, which has, it's much smoother in the finish, and it has a cord binding and not the leather grip. Those are basically the differences. And then there's this here, which is a bit of an intermediate version between the HEMA version and the actual replica, which means it has a leather grip and some aesthetically pleasing hammer marks. I don't think you could sell a sword that looks like the original, really, because even if you don't factor in the age, it's quite rough, really, at least by our modern eyes and our modern standards. Saw the advert on Facebook for this, and for myself, it was actually pretty clear fairly early on that I wanted that, because I like the idea of having something with a bit of history behind it. The only other fencing sword I really have is, for long swords, is the Albion Meyer, which is a great sword, don't get me wrong, I love it, and I've had it for years. Back when I started fencing, actually, that was kind of the new thing to get, and everyone was very excited. But the Albion Meyer, and like most feders we have, they are modern fencing swords. They are modern interpretations of the same concept of a longsword for fencing, for practice. This here is a special niche where it fits in, which is a reproduction of a historical fencing sword. There are some more out there, and that is then the one that Kvetun and Black Armory offer. Saw the advert for it on Facebook, ordered it by February, I think, 2023. Went to the webpage, paid by PayPal, and that was that. Fairly straightforward, professional looking page. It just works, really. Then I contacted them after because Ulrik actually wanted one as well, and I thought, might as well just ask if I could tack it on and save on postage. Side note, I know that in the past some people had problems actually reaching Black Armory. I never really had that problem. I think by now they have really tried to consolidate the ways of contacting them to email, and that's what I have always done, and that is what I never really had a problem with. So if you had a problem reaching them, that is maybe a way to try. My experiences with Black Armory have always been very good. They are very nice people to interact with. Adding the sword onto my existing order wasn't a problem at all. which is very nice, of course. I got the sword in May 2023 then, early, mid-May, and I even got a charming handwritten note with it, which I appreciate. And because I was in the first batch of swords, the first 12 that they actually had made, I didn't get the HEMA version, which I actually ordered, but I actually got the, like, not quite replica, but somewhere in between version that this is, with the aesthetically pleasing hammer marks and the leather grip, which I'm kind of glad about because, hey, I really quite like it. On the other hand, I actually wanted to check out the cord binding, because if you've seen my side sword number 2 review from Kvetun, I actually wasn't happy with the cord binding that I got on that, but I think they've done some work on that in the meantime, so I actually was looking forward to seeing how that went, but at the same time, I'm not going to say no to a free upgrade. Also means that I can actually check out the leather grip on that. So, but yeah, that is basically how the ordering went. Fairly straightforward, really. It worked just fine. Packaging was, you know, really quite well. It had some scuffs when it arrived, but nothing major. The swords in the parcel themselves were actually still completely wrapped. I think that's probably how they were packed by Kvetun themselves, because that pretty much looked like the 2 swords I've gotten from them directly. And they were covered in thick grease, which is always a bit of a trade-off, because on the one hand, hey, no rust, that's nice, because I had swords in the past that arrived with rust, which is never nice. But at the same time, man, that grease can be hard to get off, really. It's a bit of a pain. To be fair, though, I'd rather have that than rust. So that was all really quite nice. So, stats. What is it then that we actually have here when we have it in hand? So we have a fencing sword that is overall 134.5 centimeters long. Of that, 104 centimeters is the blade. Then we have a grip that is 24.5 centimeters and a pear-shaped pommel of another 5 centimeters. The cross is 25 centimeters across. And when it comes to the thickness of it all, the cross is basically between 13 and 10 millimeters. It starts out a bit thicker, slims out a bit, and then thickens out again. The grip is, if we go for width, it starts at, it's a wasted grip, so it starts at 38 millimeters and then goes down to 33, widens out to 36 again, and then we have 90 millimeters. And thickness, then it's slimmest kind of at actually the cross, then thickens out slightly to 23 millimeters, 20, 23, then 29, and then it slims down to 19 again. This part here is pretty much round. The thickest part of the pommel is 46 millimeters. It's all very comfortable in hand. That is actually the first grip that I have from a sword from Kvetun that I felt wasn't too thin, but that might also be because it's made after an original. When it comes to the blade, starting with the taper, it has a very pronounced shield, which is something that I really quite like. We start out at 43 millimeters and then go to an impressive 77, hard cut, to 30 millimeters, and then it slims down to at about the middle 24 millimeters, and then it spatulates out to 28 millimeters again. Distal taper, we have 6 millimeters here at the cross, 6 millimeters at and after the shield, and then it thins out to 3 millimeters at about the middle, and then 2 millimeters to the flat tip. The POB of the blade is at 10.5 centimeters, pretty much after the shield roundabout. One thing I noticed definitely as a difference to the Maya that I have is the weight. This is what I would call a hefty sword. It weighs in at 1,705 grams, so 1.7 kilograms. It has a good amount of flex, I would say. It's not wobbly. It's not the most flexible feather I've ever encountered, but it does have good flex so that it feels safe thrusting with it. If you put it down on a body weight scale and then press down on it until you have some sign of bending, then it bends at about 9.5 kilograms. Not the most accurate measurement, but it is something to check out. Keep in mind though, that does include the weight of the sword on its own. So if you want to check that against something you have, you need to keep that in mind. Also regarding the tip, what I don't know, of course, is if the local rules at the time where the sword was actually used even factored thrusts in, if that was even allowed, because it certainly wasn't, as far as I'm aware, for I think pretty much all kind of Schulfechten rules that I'm aware of. Then again, not an expert in that. Again, though, keep it in mind. Certainly from experience, when actually using it, wasn't a problem. I use it as is, and it's fine. So generally, when it comes to using it, as I said, it's a hefty sword, I'd say. Don't want to call it heavy. Heavy always sounds a bit negative, and I mean, it is certainly heavier than my Maya, which is kind of the only other fencing sword Feder that I really have considerable experience with. I've used others, of course, but haven't really owned them as much and haven't used them as much. So I think my Maya weighs in at 1.4 kilograms. So that's 1.7. That is a considerable difference. Personally, though, I like it. Now, it is something that I feel when using it. For example, we have our Kontrafechten, which is our open haul that we try to do twice a year. And that is when we have our haul open for basically 6 hours. And I try to fence as much as I can in these 6 hours with as many people as I can. And depending on how many people are there who only do longsword or want to do longsword with me, that is something that I notice. I certainly can fence longer with the Maya than with this one. At the same time, though, what I do appreciate is that it feels a bit easier to keep control of the center line, to, you know, bind and wind. It allows for a nice amount of control. It makes just flat out parrying or versetzen easier, just if you have more mass behind yourself for stopping something that comes in your general direction, that is easier. It makes for more deliberate fencing, I would say, in a way that when you have to commit to your action. You kind of have to have a game plan, really, because if you have to correct on the fly and have to work against the sword, then that's going to cost you. That's going to be rather tiring. So it kind of makes you want to fence in a way that avoids that kind of situation, which I appreciate very much. Also, it makes for a nice workout, really. So it does feel quite different than my Maya, but I really quite like it. This is an enjoyable sword to fence with, for me. As I said, the flex is not the most flexible Feder I've always had, but it's a nice amount of flex and it does feel very safe. What I did like, or do like, is that I fenced this against my Maya, of course, Ulrik Solothurn, and then Black Fencer, Steel Swords, and mostly probably Regenier, just because that's what's out there a whole lot. And the edges are nice and rounded and have kept up just fine. I honestly don't think I ever needed to file them, really. And I wasn't just, you know, slow sparring and doing controlled binding exercises. I did try to really have some nice and energetic matches with it. And it held up really just fine. As I said, I do like the hammer marks. I find them very charming. It's a nice flair, though they don't really add anything to the function. Now, as I said, I wanted to check out the cord binding, but I got the free upgrade. I like the leather grip as far as the feel of it goes. I have to say, though, that you can't really see it here with mine, because the gloves I mostly use for mine, even though it does fit all the gloves that I have, be it the Infinity gloves or the Fox or motorcycle gloves. I mostly use the Fox, I think, and that works fine for the leather, but the leather is a bit on the softer side, because Ulrik has mostly been using hard shell gloves, either Infinities or others that he has. And for him, you can see the part where he connects with his hand to the leather, especially here at the wedge. It really rubs off. You can really see scratches in the leather, and I don't think that will live that long. That does seem to be a bit on the softer side. Another thing I unfortunately noticed is that I had cracking in the grip, and it's not only me, but Ulrik as well. Just when moving the sword about, the grip didn't feel loose, but it certainly made noise. Talking to other people who've had more longswords than I had, they said that they had noticed that kind of noise coming from hilts where the wood of the grip actually had cracked after use. I don't know if that is what really happened, because the leather is still intact. What I did, though, is what I did with the side sword number 2 after talking to Kvetun, i.e. I tried to get some very, very fluid super glue into the grip, and that seems to have fixed it, at least as far as I've noticed now. Unfortunately, though, that means that of the 3 swords that I have that are made by Kvetun, all 3 of them had problems with the hilt. Be it that there was rattling, or then there was the cracking here, or just that I needed to fix it more so that the pommel doesn't move. That I don't know if I'm just unlucky or if I'm just more critical than other people. I know it is something that I'm definitely noticing quicker than other people. It's something that I personally do not quite like, but it's 3 out of 3 swords. Never to the point where I felt that it was bad as far as durability or integrity goes. Side sword number 2 with the wobbly, with the rattle in the cross, is probably the worst. As I said, the grip here never felt loose, but yeah, not a fan of the noise. So that is something where I'm not necessarily too fond of. Generally, though, I have to say, I like fencing with this. It is a beautiful sword. I like the idea of having something that, was used in the past, was considered good by someone, apparently worth keeping, worth preserving and using. And as far as I'm concerned, I would definitely recommend using it. If you are looking for something that is not the lightest, not the fastest sword, I would definitely get it again. But if you want something that you can fence with all day, then that is maybe not the right sword for you. But if you want something that kind of makes you want to fence more deliberately, commit to your actions, or just like the history behind it, then this here is definitely, then I think, I would say, hey, check out. Give it a whirl if somebody, has it. I quite like it. Now, and if everything goes right, then we'll just cut over to Ulrik giving his opinion. So we'll see how that goes. Cheers.
Hey everyone. Peter asked me to give my opinion on the Solothurn Fechtschwert by Kvetun, and I'm happy to do so. I will voice over some fencing material we just recorded this week. And since it's Christmas time, we've got a little surprise for you, so please don't be distracted by the silly headgear we are wearing. All right, let's go. So neither Peter nor me are exceptional experts in longsword fencing, so that's why you probably see us sticking to fundamental concepts of messer fencing. We just try to keep our point in line and work from there. However, we do have fun fencing with longswords every now and then. Also, it's always good to have a longsword or two on hand when you're on events or visiting people, because most people just do longsword. Now, Peter already told you this sword is more on the heavy side compared to other faders out there. So, funny thing actually is when you pick up another fader after fencing with this, basically all other swords instantly tend to feel light. Your actions and your fencing has to be proper and deliberate. You have to know what you do, or at least having some kind of a game plan to work with. Also, I feel like you have to keep your movements and your body mechanics on check and make sure you don't overcommit into your attacks, because the sword tends to draw you forward. However, it does have a great presence in the bind, and I've had some accomplished longsword fencers tell me they were having some issues with getting control of the center line when fencing against the Solothurn. So overall, it is a beautiful sword, it looks sexy, it's fun to play with, and I actually had it at the HEMAC Dijon in May 2023 with me, so some people had the chance to play around with it, and most people's opinion on picking it up is just like a positive whoa. So all in all, I can recommend this sword because it is a lot of fun to play with, and also I think it teaches good body mechanics, also in solo drills, simply because you have to work with the sheer mass of the sword. So it's not as easy to just stand in line and wiggle it around. Now, having some problems with delivery from Kvetun directly, I would probably recommend finding a local reseller based on where you are located. So Peter told you we've ordered ours from Black Armory since we're based in Europe, and that worked well for us. So this was our last video in 2023. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you all for your continuing support to our channel this year, and we've actually already got some exciting stuff planned out for 2024. So stay tuned, and until then, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. See you soon.